I really think heading into 2015 that there's a ton of pressure on general manager Les Snead and head coach Jeff Fisher of the St. Louis Rams. I really do. At some point in time, you can't just keep talking about potential. You can't just keep praising them for the maneuvering they've done in the drafts and so on and so forth. At some point in time, all of that bullshit has to match up with the production on the field. And the Rams can't be sitting there and going 6-10 again in 2015. And I think, frankly, if we're being honest with ourselves here, when it comes down to the St. Louis Rams, this is a team that's really good at trading and maneuvering within the draft, but just slightly better than so on the picking. I mean, they've gotten some really good players out of the draft the past few years, but they haven't gotten nearly enough home runs that they should have. They haven't got nearly as many home runs as you may have been led to believe. This is a team that's made several mistakes in terms of some of the players they've picked, especially in the slots that they've picked them. See Isaiah Pete as one example. It's great to be able to maneuver and do all of this, but at some point in time, it's got to come to fruition and produce something. And clearly, based off of the record in 2014 of 6-10, that you could sit there and blame on the Bradford injury, but it's not likely to be a whole lot better with Bradford any fucking ways. This is a team that's been so-so, and still a team looking for their long-term franchise quarterback. Now, they may have felt that they've gotten it in a guy like Nick Foles. They were finally able to shed Sam Bradford and his ridiculous contract and bring in a younger, cheaper option who's going to be in a contract year in Foles, and maybe good things are going to happen. But, the pressure was on here for the Rams in this 2015 NFL draft. I think they needed to establish an identity, especially an offensive identity. You spent enough picks and enough money and resources on the defensive side of the ball. Now was the time to balance things out. Now was the time to bring that offense up to snuff. If you want to be able to compete in the NFC West, you want to be a playoff team in the NFC, you're going to have to be much more offensively than the St. Louis Rams have been over the past few seasons. And you could kind of see in their draft that they were going very heavily with an NFC West type of philosophy. They were looking at the Seattle and San Francisco model, and they're saying that we have some similarities already in place, so we need to be better at those things in order to be better than those teams and be able to compete in this division and potentially win this division. You look at their first-round pick, Todd Gurley out of Georgia. I mean, they took a running back number 10 overall, so you got to imagine they envision him being the Frank Gore type, the Marshawn Lynch type, that big physical between the tackles type, 3-down running back type of guy. You look at their other picks, they really focused on the offensive line in this draft. I believe they spent a total of 4 picks on the offensive line. But you look at their second and third round picks, sitting there and taking guys like Rob Havenstein from Wisconsin, Jamon Brown from Louisville. Maybe Havenstein they view as an Anthony Davis type of guy. Maybe they look at Jamon Brown as a Justin Britt or J.R. Sweezy type of guy, whatever the case might be. You could see that there was a clear-cut focus for the Rams in this draft in terms of where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. It wasn't necessarily going to be best player available. It was going to be, we need to work on the offense and we need to establish an offensive identity. It's that simple. And you could see that play out all throughout their draft, even with other offensive linemen like Andrew Nadell, what have you. Then in the third round, I think they surprised a lot of people, myself included, when they not only took a quarterback, more so was the quarterback that they took, that's Sean Mannion of Oregon State. Here's a guy that at times has shown some potential to be that type of quarterback, but then at other times is frustrating to watch and looks like a guy that could have just as easily been undrafted. I mean, the Rams obviously had to have some type of confidence in him to spend a third-round pick on him. They spend a day 2 pick on a quarterback. Just only time will tell if that's ultimately going to be their guy long-term. Now, in today's NFL, in order to really contend for a championship, you have to draft and develop your own quarterback. That's not an opinion of mine. That is a statistical fact. So maybe this is their guy. I don't know. When it comes to the St. Louis Rams draft for 2015, I understand the approach, and I understand the philosophy. And I do applaud the Rams for clearly having a plan and sticking to that plan. But in some ways, I kind of question the approach, I question the philosophy, and I question the plan. Now, in terms of their best pick, it's got to be Todd Gurley. In a lot of ways, it was really the only pick of the Rams that I really liked. They took a running back in the top 10, yes, but I do think Gurley was that type of player. I think he's that type of special back. And this is a franchise player. If you don't have a franchise quarterback, you better at least have a franchise running back. I think the St. Louis Rams have that now. To me, this guy was the third best player in the 2015 NFL draft, and to be able to get him at pick number 10, regardless of position, is a fucking steal, period. In terms of second guessing, I got to look at the day two for the Rams. They took Rob Havenstein, a limited right tackle from Wisconsin, in round 2. In previous Wisconsin offensive linemen scare you off, guys like Peter Kahns, guys like Gabe Carimi. Yeah, you'll bring up Joe Thomas, but he was drafted back in 2007. Now, you took a guy that will be lucky to play right tackle at the NFL level. I mean, he's a big physical mauler. He's a hard worker and all of that, but he also is a product of the system. It's just, at that point in time, there were better offensive linemen on the board, both outside and on the interior, in my opinion. I thought Havenstein was a massive reach in round number 2. I don't think Jamon Brown was as massive of a reach in round number 3, but I still think he was a bit of a reach in round number 3. Perhaps could have been there another round later. I actually would have had less problem with it if they took Brown in round 2 and Havenstein in round 3. I really don't get it, though. I thought in both rounds there were much better players. And much better players on the offensive side of the ball in particular. And then Deshaun Manning in round 3. There's no way, in my opinion, that this guy is the third or fourth best quarterback in this draft class. I think they're insane. I think they're insane if they think Manning's going to be that type of guy. And at best, he's Mike Glennon, and Mike Glennon isn't an NFL starter. Now, guys like Havenstein and Brown could surprise. I mean, they could fit into their system well and what the Rams want to do. And end up being longtime contributors. I'm not going to dispute that. But the biggest thing I second guess is that you're sitting there with the 10th overall pick, and you have to fix your offense and address your offense. Yet at no point in time, on the first 2 days of the draft, did you dip into the wide receiving core, another really good, deep class of wide receivers. The fuck were the Rams thinking? If you think you're going to go into next season with Kenny Britt, Brian Quick coming off of an injury, mind you, Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, and think you're going to be perfectly fine at the wide receiver position, I want whatever ganja they're fucking smoking in St. Louis, because this is ridiculous. You bring in Nick Foles, you want to have him succeed, then give him somebody to actually fucking throw the ball to. You're sitting there at pick number 10. Like I said, it's hard for me on the one hand to knock them for taking Gurley because he was my number 3 player in this entire draft. But to me, in a lot of ways, it was a huge luxury pick for them. They already had Trey Mason, who definitely flashed signs in 2014 as a rookie, the third rounder out of Auburn. This was a really good running back class. Did the Rams in particular have to spend the 10th overall pick on a running back, even if it was going to be a stud like Todd Gurley? Could they have sat there in round 2 or round 3 and taken somebody else? Maybe somebody in round 3 like a Duke Johnson who could have sat there perhaps and been, the type of pass catcher out of the backfield that Trey Mason really isn't. Give you more of a complementary type of platoon system. And all the while allowing you maybe with that 10th overall pick to draft a wide receiver like the Devontae Parkers of the world. A guy that could be a legit number 1 NFL wide receiver. I don't get it. And, while the Rams were able to sit there and accumulate additional picks once again, which they haven't had a problem doing in recent years, as the Panthers, for some inexplicable reason, decided they had to peel up big time to go get Devin Funchess, it's just, again, it's one thing to be great at the maneuvering and the trading, but the execution of these drafts by the Rams is so-so at best, and I think it was here again. You could clearly see that they were building themselves in the mold of a Seattle or a San Francisco. But when you look at it, part of the reason the Seahawks didn't win the Super Bowl, among other reasons, is the fact that they lack playmakers on offense. When you look at the San Francisco 49ers, one of the major reasons they imploded in 2014, besides the front office shit with Jim Harbaugh, is the fact that they lack playmakers on offense. They had no deep threat outside Vernon Davis is washed up. Colin Kaepernick regressed. Is that really the mold you want to build yourself in? A team like the San Francisco 49ers? And even, like I said, with the Seahawks. They were so bad in terms of offensive skill players outside of Marshawn Lynch that they had to go trade their first-round pick and a Pro Bowl caliber center, Max Unger, to go get a guy in Jimmy Graham. Gurley, to me, again, was a luxury that maybe shouldn't have been the choice for the Rams. It'll be hard to knock it long term because I do think Gurley is going to be a stud at the NFL level. It's just, to me, you already had Mason. You have plenty of other good running backs in this class. Would you rather? Let's put it this way, and I'll ask us, the St. Louis Rams fans, this: would you rather have Todd Gurley, Rob Havenstein, and Jamon Brown, or let's say, would you rather have Devontae Parker? Fuck it. Let's just say you took Duke Johnson in round 2 and then Garrett Grayson in round 3. Just throwing it out there. I mean, to me, there was just a better way for the Rams to allocate their selections to different positions. They reached on Havenstein, no question. They reached on Brown. They reached on Mannion. When your day 2 of your draft is all devoted to reaches, it doesn't matter if you were able to peel back and accumulate additional picks. The execution of what you did with those picks was still so-so. Again, this is a team that really knows how to move in the draft. Les Snead does a wonderful job of maneuvering within a draft. But do they know how to make a difference with the draft? And yes, this is a team over the past few years. They've drafted some studs and drafted some playmakers, but they lack playmakers still, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. And while you get Gurley, and Gurley's going to be a beast, and him and Mason as a 1-2 combination in the backfield could be some scary stuff. Are you going to line one of them up at wide receiver 50 times a game on the offensive side of the ball? I'm just saying. I understand the approach. I understand the philosophy. I just don't fully get the approach, and I don't get the philosophy, and I don't particularly like the execution of this draft for the St. Louis Rams. To me, they were one of the more questionable performers in the 2015 NFL draft, and I give them a grade of a C-. I do think, like I said, that potentially this could grade out a little bit better long-term because Havenstein and Brown could be guys that develop into 6, 8, 10-year NFL starters, and we really don't think about how big of reaches they were within that whole draft cycle. But this was a draft that I thought the Rams needed to do better in and should have done better in and ultimately didn't do as good as they needed to do.